Hello and welcome back to Chatbot on Robot Republic with me, Josh Riku, and today we have a very special guest because I am joined by Tom, who has been working really hard on an amazing D&D setting book. Hello, Tom.
Hello, thanks for having me. Happy to be here, coming in
Thank you.
from Alaska.
I was going to say the time difference is amazing because it's daytime over there for you at the moment, isn't it?
It is currently probably for another 2-3 hours, and then it's back to nighttime.
I said, is there a lot of nighttime in Alaska? Like, I was talking to one of my friends about this earlier. I was like, is Alaska one of those places where they have really long nights and then really short days?
Yes, when we get about in mid-December, early January, we get maybe a couple hours at best of sunlight. So we got to make of it what we can.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. So, Tom, you have been working on Bellarius, which, if correct me if I'm wrong, is a setting and campaign book that expands on some of the ideas that are currently available in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Yes, we created a world that is much more centered on some of the role play aspects of Dungeons and Dragons. It is designed particularly for kind of more relaxing, low stress kinds of campaigns.
Oh, that's amazing. And obviously, prepping for this interview, I've been reading through it. I can't wait to play it. It is really cool. Where did the kind of inspiration for this come from? Because obviously, people that have played Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs know very much that it is, it can be at times quite intense if you're fighting, hordes of cultists or big scary dragons or weird interdimensional eldritchy monstery things. Where did the inspiration for a more chill and calm kind of Dungeons and Dragons idea come from?
Yeah. Well, personally, I've always been a big fan of sorts of slice of life genre works. Me and my friends had just finished a very intense Cyberpunk Red campaign. I don't know if you've played that, but that's quite high octane action there. And by the end of it, we were all just so exhausted that we were like, well, we need to sit back. We need a break from that.
Absolutely, because there can be like tabletop RPGs, especially when you're like proper going into like some of the battles and stuff. They are really quite exhausting at times because you have to be on like firing on full cylinders and stuff. Oh, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and so that idea of that slice of life stuff is kind of where the inspiration for Bellarius came from then.
Yeah, we drew a lot. Obviously, we have some vibes from kind of Ghibli-esque art styles. We drew things from various other media. Obviously, we did take a little bit of inspiration from Dishonored. I wouldn't necessarily call that slice of life, but it was a big part in our aesthetic.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, to be fair, when I was going through this, there was one thing that jumped out of me as just like completely amazing, and that was the idea of sky whales. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Love the sky whale idea, and just everything in it, to be fair. When I've been going through it and stuff, prep with this, it's so cool, it's so creative. So kind of obviously we've talked a bit about inspiration. Where did the kind of the lore and the setting all kind of come from and stuff? Because obviously the setting in this game is really creative and you've put so much work into all the lore and stuff behind it. Kind of how did you come up with these ideas? Is it something that you've always kind of been thinking about in the back of your mind, or has it been something you just thought, right, no, I've got this idea, I'm going to run with it and see what happens?
Yeah, well, we designed Bolarius over the course of about a year and a half, and during that time, it was a bit of a top-down design because we knew from the very get-go that it was going to be a sort of whaling-esque world, very much so focused on these large mythical beings that everybody else kind of depends on and influences the world by. And once we took that, we said, well, we know we want it to have that, and we know we want it to be a place where you can relax and kind of have some softer-esque stories going on. So with those two things combined, we tried to build everything around that core idea. With the whole kind of soft post-apocalyptic world, we said, well, how is this going to function? How does the sky whales and the people who hunt them kind of integrate into that society? How does everything work together in this sort of isolated world that we've made?
Oh, that's really cool, and so much work has gone into this. Clearly, like reading through the document, all of the lore, everything else, it's so detailed and so rich. It must have taken ages to write.
It did take quite a few times. Editing was a fun process. We actually went through quite a few renditions of running the whole book through different PDF processors, because we originally started everything out in the home brewery, which I'm sure you're familiar with, a very popular program. And then about a couple months before we wanted to launch, we switched everything to Affinity Publisher, and that set us back by half a year.
Oh God, that must have been
we did
infuriating.
actually, it was a very fun learning process. It did take us longer to put out the book than I was hoping professionally, but just the learning process was incredible. So hopefully our future products are a bit faster.
Well, hopefully, and there are going to be future products, which is really exciting. We'll come on to those in a little bit.
Yes.
So obviously, the game it uses all or most of the kind of mechanics that people that play Dungeons and Dragons D&D will be kind of familiar with and stuff. When you were kind of creating the game and you were thinking about kind of like, the general, I'm trying to think of the word because my mind's gone blank. When you were thinking about the systems that are in place for D&D and stuff, did you kind of say, right, this works, let's use that? Or was it a case of this is a system that kind of works, but we're going to need to kind of tweak it and adapt it sort of thing? How did you kind of come about that process, and kind of if you adapted them, how did you kind of adapt them for the project?
Yeah, we had systems that we completely made up on our own, like some of the downtime activities, and then there were systems that we relied fully on Dungeons and Dragons for, traditional combat systems, all that. Particularly the ship system, and the ship combat that is seen in traditional Dungeons and Dragons is something we heavily modified. It wasn't a system that I felt was quite what we wanted for the whaling combat encounters. So we elected instead to suggest more of a siege style combat encounter where you have, rather than a ship that's on the initiative order, we heavily suggest that you have the ship as part of the map, along with various armaments and artillery that the crew can interact with. We felt by doing that, it was much more of people on a boat versus a whale versus a boat versus a whale. You can, of course, still run it as the traditional Dungeons and Dragons ship combat rules go, but in our personal playtesting, I quite enjoyed having the focus be on the players themselves.
I know that kind of that's one of the things that really excites me about this is instead of ship to ship combat in the kind of traditional sense, which I've done once in my life and it was a bit touch and go.
Yeah.
I looked at the siege kind of style of this and I was like, that's a really cool way of doing like ship to ship combat, because you've got so much more you can explore and interact with as a player. And for me, ship to ship combat just kind of felt like ship 1 attacks, ship 2 attacks. I was a bit like,
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to too much creativity.
No, whereas this is like I was reading through it and I was like, oh, this sounds so epic. Just really awesome. So I know when you were developing Bellarius, kind of how there is so much lore and stuff, how difficult was it, if it was difficult at all, to line up the kind of the narrative and the stories and the lore and stuff that you were kind of developing with the D&D mechanics? Because you've already said that you kind of had to kind of adapt some of the D&D things. You've had to come up with your own independent systems to some things, which we're going to come on to in a minute because I'm quite excited to talk about it, but I'm not at the moment. So kind of how difficult was it to kind of line up some of those ideas and some of that lore to the kind of D&D systems that already pre-exist?
Yeah, well, when you make something like this, you want people to be able to do whatever they want in it, because obviously people are going to adapt it for their own uses. One thing we tried to do was we took every single D&D class and we said, well, how is this going to fit into a peaceful kind of non-violent world in a way? So trying to do the mental exercise of how do you have a core fighter belong in the world of Bolarius was a very interesting time. And we have suggestions for everything that you could do. I think that one of the core things was when we were doing our initial development was we ran into a lot of people who were more interested in interacting with the sky whales in a more compassionate sense,
Mhm.
and we decided to lean into that a little bit with different options for that. So classes such as druids and rangers and whatnot are a bit more suggested and have lore options there for people who want to explore the different methods of interacting with the world.
That's really cool. And that was like the thing that jumped out to me when I was kind of initially, when we were kind of talking about setting the interview up and talked about this and stuff. I was like, oh my god, there are sky whales. Can you talk to them? Can you communicate with them? And that was my immediate thought. And I know that there'll be some people watching this going, my immediate thought would be to kill them because I play a barbarian, an orc barbarian. And I'm like, no, I want to talk to the sky whales.
You know, we had more people say that they wanted to talk to the sky whales than hunt them. Which
That's amazing. That must have been like one of those moves where you think, yes, we have created a good creature here because people don't want to immediately murder them.
Yes, yes.
So with the kind of a version of the game and the lore book and everything, one of the things that's really jumped out to me, and you've credited all these amazing artists and stuff in the book because the artwork is phenomenal. When you were coming up with this process and stuff, how important was it for you and the team to make sure that you had really solid artwork to kind of go along with this? Because obviously, you know, Wizards of the Coast and their D&D books have like these big monster manuals with all these fancy artwork and stuff. Did you look at that and say, right, this is kind of like the base standard, we need to have this artwork in there? Or was it more of a, we would like to have this artwork because we want people to be able to kind of visualize all these great ideas we've had?
It was a bit of a mix. You know, we wanted artwork to help kind of showcase the world and, you know, what it's about. But also, as much as we also wanted the product to be a bit easy on the eyes, it does go quite heavy on the lore and the tones and whatnot. And in order for it to be more approachable, we wanted to make sure that we had some art there. A lot of the art is done by personal friends, but we also reached out to professional artists. One thing I considered a bit of a personal victory I was very happy with was for the chapter titles. We got usage rights for pieces done by Gregory Fermonteau, who was a Ubisoft art director.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he great, fantastic individual, very kind, very was happy to help us out despite perhaps not playing Dungeons and Dragons himself. But
I mean, what a contact to have as well. Just an art director at Ubisoft did some of the artwork for my game is just wow. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, we discussed briefly, you know, original pieces, but his own art was already good enough. I was like, sir, I would be very happy to be able to include your art as is.
That must have been one hell of a conversation. I just in my head, I just have this imagining of you kind of prepping for this game. So we've got some ideas, and he just sits there and goes, "So I've done these," and you sitting there going, "Yes, that's pretty much back on."
Well, you know, you always see great artists on the internet, and sometimes you always see one that's like, that's what I need.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
oh, that's so cool as well. Ubisoft art director doing some of the artwork for your game. And to be fair, like all of the art in the book and all of the artists that you've kind of, you know, been working with and stuff, it's just phenomenal. Like I was going through it, like, you know, the kind of, we'll come on to it in a minute, but the fish that you can engage with. I've noticed how I'm being really specific about not dropping the spoiler yet because people will be like, what's he talking about? What's he talking about? The fish that you can interact with, they really jumped out to me as well because they look so, like you said at the start, it's very Ghibli-esque with the kind of art style and stuff, and kind of like reading the lore around them. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this. It's very much my kind of thing. It's just nice and calm and relaxing. So moving on to the thing that I've kind of been skating around for a while, there are downtime activities are a big part of Bellarius. And you know, when we play D&D, we don't necessarily have downtime activities per se, other than walk around town, talk to random NPCs, and unfortunately probably end up starting a fight with someone. So there are a small number of downtime activities available to players in Bellarius. The one that I'm most excited about, and I'm going to ask another follow-up question on this in a minute, is fishing, because fishing in D&D just sounds so cool. But kind of generally thinking about the downtime activities and stuff, how will they work when players are kind of wanting to do them and stuff, especially if you're part of like a party? So if you've got someone who, for example, like me, will probably be like, I'm going to go fishing. How does that work with the rest of the party? Can the other party go fishing with them, or can they choose to do different things? Kind of how does that work? And is it kind of like in the same way that you've got like, things recharge on short rest and long rest, or is it more of a, if you want to go fishing, you can go fishing and you can do some dice rolls?
Well, when we have the players, in these giant airships moving from settlement to settlement, they're taking days at a time of just travel. So we wanted to give them something to do. Fascinatingly enough, fishing, of course, was way more popular than the other one. But just as you would ask players when they get to a new town, what do you want to do? If you want to split up or stick together, it is up to a little bit about what the individual player wants to do, but we try to include options for multiplayer if they want to. So for instance, for the fishing minigame, it's very much so of person versus fish combat, but we have an item for the dip net for if you want to bring a second person on board, they can help you out a little bit, make things a little bit easier for you. We didn't quite include kind of teamwork activities, that's what I'll call it, for the whalebone carving, since we wanted that to be a bit more of a personal experience. But for the fishing, at least, we wanted to say, well, if you want to bring a buddy along, you can.
That's really cool. And just fishing in D&D. Just cool.
We were working on it, and I said, I wonder if anybody has done this before. And then my friend told me, well, actually, it's included in the Icewind Dale book. And I looked at it and I said, I think we're okay to move forward.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm reading through the kind of how to go about the kind of fishing and stuff in Bellarius. I like what jumped out to me is that kind of, if you want to do it on your own, you can do it on your own. But if you want a friend to give you a hand with it, you can do that as well. And then that will have kind of like certain perks and certain things that will support and help when you're trying to catch fish and stuff. And there are different types of fish you can catch, which was exciting.
Yeah, of course.
And I like the fact that they were tiered as well. Like, you can catch you can catch like, basic fish, you can catch good fish, you can catch great fish, which was really cool. The other downtime activity is, I quite liked this, but then I also quite like the Dishonored series. Because it is to do with crafting whalebones and stuff. Now, crafting whalebones is really, really cool. People that played the Dishonored series will know that in those games, you carve whalebones and runes and stuff, and they give you perks and whatnot, and they can help in combat and other kind of situations and stuff. Is that the case in Bolarius? Can players use these crafted whalebone things to help them in certain situations?
Yeah, so the scrimshaw mechanic that we made was very much so as another resource that somebody could do with the whale product that they've obtained. And we decided to have it go in two different ways. So you can make your traditional scrimshaw like somebody would do in the real world, or you can try to make a whistle. And they both serve very different purposes based on what you want to do. The traditional scrimshaw, you can do it, basically there's a table, and just like you said with the fish, it's tiered between qualities depending on how good you are at the skill checks needed to complete the task. But I don't know about a lot of DMs, but I enjoy giving my players magic items. I also personally really enjoy consumable magic items, so people can kind of have more variety and play around. So the whalebone scrimshaws that we've made, you can make various items by completing these checks completely randomly. You just decide that you want to make something, and then you see where the hands of fate guide you. That would basically be items like, for instance, most of them are taken from traditional Dungeons and Dragons. Like there's a prosthetic eye, and we said, well, how about making a prosthetic eye out of whalebone? That'd be pretty cool. As well as a bit more of what you would think from Dishonored. There are these specifically, I believe in the book they're just called whalebone scrimshaw, but basically small charms that you can consume. And depending on the quality of the one you've made. It can last for longer, but basically it just gives you an extra D4 on whatever check you're trying to make, and it benefits you just that little extra, little tiny bit that you might need.
Which, to be honest, those people that play D&D, more often than not, a little tiny boost sometimes makes the difference between hitting an enemy or dodging, or that very valuable and very needed death saving throw.
Yeah, we did have, I had the idea of a character who could just be completely stacked with these scrimshaws and just be using them every single check, every single attack roll. But my players were too involved in fishing to try that.
I like that. You spent all this time creating all these really valuable things, and everyone was like, "Shh, we're fishing."
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Obviously, one of the things that really stood out to me when I was prepping for this interview was the huge amount of really fascinating lore and stuff that is available in Bellarius. And we could sit here and we could discuss all the lore, but we'll probably be here for another 2 hours, which a lot of people will be like, that's really interesting, let's do that. But I also think, people should go and read the book, because the way in which that you've kind of explained some of the lore and the way that you're describing it is just gorgeous, for lack of a better term. When I was reading through it, I was like, oh, that's really well written and really nice. It flowed really nicely. It just makes me sound really sad that I was reading it going, oh, that sounds really nice. Oh, that's really cool. But it's fine. If people are watching this, they know what I'm like. They've probably realized, oh, he's a bit of a sad one who enjoys reading books. For you personally, what are some of the more interesting lore points that you really wanted in kind of Bellarius, in the game, in the project, for you personally? And then kind of like, if there are any other like bits that other team members have said, oh, we need to add that in there, what are those as well? Because obviously there's so much of it, and it's brilliant.
I'd say that, yeah, the most, thank you, by the way, for all the compliments. I think my favorite part of Bolarius, it was a very early design choice, but from the get-go, we said we wanted to have one god. Settings, they try to lure you in with the pantheons. Here's all the different kind of clerics and paladins and everything that you can do. And we said, we're going to have one god. We're going to have Borble. It's a whale. That's all you get. So I quite enjoyed taking a look at that and saying, well, what are the different ways we can go with this? And how can basically every single possible cleric domain kind of fit into this idea of a monotheistic pantheon? And we ended up, there's a decent section there just for theology, for the different kind of ways people have interpreted the religion of Borble, that people can gravitate to in different methods. But during playtesting, kind of throwing ideas around, we had a ton of people really like the idea of the sky basilica, basically these giant supernatural cathedrals that existed high above in the clouds. And for whatever reason, we had a lot of people say, I want to go explore that. I want to go see what's inside there. Absolutely. And that is actually where our playtest campaign is heading towards.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, to be fair, that was like one of the things that jumped out at me, because in my head I was just thinking about, the kind of like in the UK, St. Paul's Cathedral and the Basilica there, or the ones that you kind of like, if you've played Assassin's Creed 2, when you're mooching around Florence, that sort of stuff as well. Those basilicas, that's kind of in my head. That's kind of like I was imagining these big, grandiose religious buildings with these beautiful domed roofs and stuff, just kind of floating in the clouds. I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's the sort of place that I'd probably want to go and visit. I want to go visit that in real life. So, I'll have to play Bellarius with like a group of people to go and visit it in my mind. But I was like, oh, if that existed in real world, that'd be amazing. And then kind of anything else as well that kind of like, the team thought, oh, that's really awesome, we need to put that in there as well.
Yeah, well, we did have, so we had one player who I attribute a lot of great thoughts to, who specifically, when they were looking at their character and what they wanted to create for our kind of beta test campaign, they said, well, I don't want to be from the core map. I don't want to be from the 6 Duchy area, Bolarius proper. I want to be from the outside. And we hadn't quite explored that yet. And it was like, well, what's your thoughts on that? And he says, I'm going to be from Farlandia. I was like, okay. So we created a thing called the Farlands, and basically has to do with everything that's not included in Bellarius proper, everything that's outside of the core map that we provide with the book, and kind of just thinking about life outside of the central map and how things function has been
That's
quite
really
good for
cool.
world building.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that just kind of.
The sun is in my face.
I was gonna say, I'm just gonna see the slow move as the sun's slowly moving across.
Yes, the sun is setting here at 12:45 in Alaska time.
Flavin' heck. I mean, we had sun until about 4:30 this afternoon in Britain, even though it was, well, standardly overcast and rainy. But yeah, I mean, from a world building perspective as well, kind of having play testers that were saying, well, actually, no, I want to be from this place that you've not described yet, must have been really awesome, because that then gets you to kind of think of a bit more like, oh, actually, no, people might want to do that. So we need to kind of think a bit more outside the box and stuff. Which is really cool. The next question is kind of like, it's all linked into kind of what we talked about in terms of like the lore and stuff, but kind of, did you come up with the setting for Bellarius first, or did you kind of come up with the lore and the narrative and the kind of stories and stuff that players will be able to experience whilst they're kind of working through it? Kind of what came first, really? I know it's kind of like a chicken or the egg question, but I like to ask it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Yeah, we knew from the get-go that we wanted a world that did two things. We said, well, whaling in the sky is pretty cool. And then we said, number two, we want something that we can relax in after our last campaign. And so we knew very specifically what we wanted Bolarius to serve as a narrative purpose, and like very specifically what kind of campaigns we were hoping to run in it. So a lot of the design choices in that realm kind of serve the purpose of, we have a very specific kind of game idea that we want to run, and how can we make that happen? And then we started to realize, well, there's actually not too many other settings like this. Maybe we should take it a little bit further and see where we can go.
That's really awesome, and it is. I mean, to be fair, like in terms of settings and stuff, most things in D&D are always big, grandiose castles or scary tombs and dragon temples and infernal, the layers of hell and whatnot. So actually, to have something that is completely outside of the box and stuff is really quite nice. And when I was looking through it and stuff, I was like, actually, this is a breath of fresh air. I want to go and I want to do this with I've got a small D&D group that I kind of play with, kind of like, nothing to Robot Republic, because I've just some mates that we play D&D with. And I look at that and go, when I get around to DMing, I'm going to run a Bellarius campaign, because this is really quite nice and it's chill. And we tend to do big kind of like OTT battle sequence and stuff, and this is like, it's nice and it's calm and it's a bit more laid back and stuff, and it would be nice for my D&D group as a kind of like chill time after some of our more adventurous campaigns, which is really cool. Next question then, kind of like, when you were developing the lore and stuff, obviously you kind of already hinted that it was quite an organic process. You kind of had this starting point and you were kind of like testing out ideas and stuff, but were there during the process like really specific things that you had to keep in there? Obviously we've talked about the kind of the sky whales and stuff. I assume they were a non-negotiable from day one. We're gonna explore sky whaling, we're gonna have, this is going to be a key point of it. Were there any other things that were kind of like, this is here from day one and it's sticking in there, or something that came up a little bit further into the process and you were like, this is absolutely staying in as well? Or was it more of a kind of just like, the sky whales and the whaling is going to be core to this and everything else just kind of like grew around it? Or were there other things that you kind of said, we need to have this in there as well?
We did say from the get-go that we wanted to have more than sky whaling as far as the going goes. The going goes, nice. I'm personally a big fan of running exploration type campaigns. That's a big thing I've done previously with most of my previous Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. And as much as we enjoyed the sky whaling, we have the whole economic system in Bolarius. Each town, each location has its own culture, its own people, and it has specific imports and exports and what the people need and want. And we said very early on, we're going to make this a little bit of a trading simulator. You can buy things from one location, go to another, sell us, make a profit maybe. And that was a very, very early decision that we decided on, that we wanted, because as long as you're moving around the map looking for the sky whales, well, there's some other things you can do as well. Or if you want to say, well, we don't want to touch sky whaling at all, you have some options there. And just likewise, if somebody wants to not even bother with going from town to town, they can completely ignore the system. There's no one system in the Bellarius book that is mandatory, which I think is useful when you're trying to make something that people will use.
Absolutely. And kind of like that player choice being at the core of everything as well is why I think, from when I was going through this and stuff, I was like, this has got hugely broad appeal, because there is such a broad kind of spectrum of things that players can kind of do and interact with. And it kind of, when I was going through it, I was like, there is so much in this book. There is so much lore. There are so many things that players can interact with in terms of cultures and people and stuff. And when I was going through, I was thinking that it's so broad and will kind of, hopefully kind of appeal to so many D&D players and stuff who, know, because there is battle stuff in there. I was kind of going through the bestiary and stuff. There are some quite formidable looking monsters actually, which I was a bit like, oh, hello. But it is, kind of, it gives players a very different approach to D&D actually when I was going through it, that I haven't properly come across. I've not been playing D&D for years and years and years like some people have, but kind of when I've been playing through it and stuff, it's been, go to town, go talk to people, buy some stuff if you want, on to the next battle. And it's been very much like that. There's been role play elements and stuff, but it's always been on to the next set piece, on to the next set piece. Whereas this is a lot more broad and allows players to make those choices, which I think is really, really nice. And it's really important actually as well, because we play these games, we want to have the ability to make choices and explore. I mean, that's my thoughts anyway. If you disagree with me, people, let me know in the comments. The next question then is, it's my cheeky question. It's my kind of, my bit of a doozy one that I always work in. Kind of, what have been some of the most challenging parts of this development journey? Obviously, you've already mentioned the losing half a year when you changed the format that you were using to create the documents and stuff, but kind of what other kind of like big kind of like issues have there been during the development process in terms of trying to get this kind of worked out and stuff? Because obviously there's so much lore. There must have been moments where you were kind of sitting there going, how does this work and what does that do, and what are we going to do here, and what about these people? Kind of, what have been some of those challenges?
That is a good question. We did have a couple things that actually went through quite a lot of revisions, especially the airships and the whale boats and all that sort of stuff went through quite a couple of revisions before we figured out what we felt was comfortable, while still pertaining the integrity of the traditional D&D kind of boat systems. Editing was a hell process. I have never been one for editing, so trying to read the entire book multiple times to change things was not fun. We did run into a fair amount of technical issues during development. We did go through a whole computer reset at one point, and we almost lost something at that point.
Oh my god.
But yeah, thankfully though, we didn't lose too much progress there, which was a relief.
That must have been one of those moments where you're like, please don't be gone, please don't be gone, please don't be gone, please don't be gone.
Yeah. I don't know what I would have done. And then of course, we did have a little bit of a crisis with directions a few times, because here doing things internally in Alaska, we were like, yeah, whaling, nobody has a problem with that. And then we took to the internet and we were like, oh yes, right. But
Greenpeace was sitting there on their keyboards going, that's not allowed, that's not good.
Yes, so that's our whole kind of turn of the century industrial revolution aesthetic was a bit of a reconciliation of that, as well as making the other options for people to kind of, well, do what they want.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, like, I can imagine how it's a hefty document with so much stuff, and this is just the stuff the players get. I'm assuming there are hundreds of documents and files and notebooks with other ideas and stuff that have kind of culminated in the creation of Bellarius. So I can imagine how editing must have been a very arduous process. I'm the same when I have to edit stuff. I type something out and I sit there and go, that's fine. And then I go back and read through it and I'm like, oh, I need to edit it and I don't really want to. And then it takes me long. I don't know if you're the same as me, Tom, but when I'm editing stuff, I tend to be like, oh, I really don't want to do this. I really can't. The first draft will be fine. The first draft will be fine. But there's that niggling voice that's like, no, check it again, check it again.
Yeah, it's a very you can never win, can you?
No.
Yeah, we did have a couple times where it's just like I have to cut off some lines here because I can't get the artwork to fit how I want it to fit, and but all this is so important. What am I gonna do?
That's when you have to sit there and go, okay, how brutal can I be? Or can I make the picture a bit smaller?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair though, the finished product is absolutely amazing. You know, obviously we're talking about this right now. People that are watching it, go and check out Bellarius because it is so good, and it is, you know, it's like a slice of life for D&D. That brings me on to my final question, which is kind of what's next for you and the team? What's next for Bellarius? Is it on to another similar project, or are you going to kind of look at building more stuff for Bellarius? Kind of what's the plan moving forwards?
Yeah, we have a couple projects in the work currently. I'm very interested in working more on the world of Bolarius, but we are kind of looking at some more broad options to build up the funding that we need to, frankly, for Bolarius projects. Our next work is going to be, we're taking our fishing minigame that we developed, and we are just going to turn that into a full supplement that people can use for any Dungeons and Dragons game that they're running. In Bolarius, it was all about skyfish and fishing in the clouds. We're going to take that, rework it, make it better, more fish. You can fish lake, river, ocean, wherever you want, but we're just making a full fish book.
Oh, that's amazing. That's got me really excited.
Yes.
just fishing in D&D. It's going to be a revolution.
Somebody has to do it.
Absolutely. And why not you guys? You've got an amazing system already. Just translate it to something else. Oh, that's exciting. Are there any other, because obviously, you know, are there any other big projects and stuff? Obviously, you said that you personally want to keep working on Bellarius. You've got this fishing supplement coming out. Are there any other projects in the pipeline at the moment, or is it just going to be kind of like a little bit of downtime and then see where the ground lies?
Yeah, well, those are the only ones I can say for 100% positive we're going to do. Personally, I'd like to see myself doing more work on Cyberpunk Red and other tabletop role-playing systems. And then at some points, ideas are still being hatched, but our own tabletop game we would like to see come to fruition.
Oh, that would be amazing. And you know what? Any of those projects, we will definitely have you back on to talk about those, because if it's, you know, just Bellarius has got me really excited, and I really want to play it with either, you know, some of the guys on Robot Republic or some of my friends and stuff, because it just seems really cool. So any of those projects and stuff, we will be keeping in contact and a close eye on all the stuff, and you guys should too. And Tom, where can the wonderful people that are watching us find you on the joys of the interweb?
Yeah, so most of our projects are discussed and advertised on our Twitter at bogus_cheese. Bogus cheesecake was taken. But if you're looking for any of our stuff, you can look up Bolarius. You can look up Bogus Cheesecake is the name of our team being myself. We have a coffee, we have a itch, which is where we have most of our games. We do have Bolarius up on drive-through if that is your cup of tea. But yeah, for the most central news, you're going to want to go ahead and find us on Twitter at bogus_cheese.
That's amazing. And obviously there is a link tree that goes to all of those sites down in the description right now. So if you're watching this video and you're sitting there thinking, I want to do fishing in D&D, go and check it out. Or if you're just generally excited about the idea of sky whales and sky whaling and all of these other amazing lore-based things that Tom has developed, then absolutely go and check it out. Tom, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your lovely Alaskan afternoon to sit down and talk with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy to discuss a little bit about what we've made.
Amazing. And obviously, if you are watching this video and you haven't already, please do, like I said, go and check out the comments. Let us know what you think about Bellarius. Let us know what you're most excited about. Is it the fishing? Is it the idea of siege-based ship-to-ship combat, which was really awesome? Let us know in the comments. And please do like and subscribe to the Robot Republic for more options. And obviously, if you are already subscribed and you've not done it already, go and tickle that little bell icon, which will be somewhere on the screen as well, so you get notified of all of our new content. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. Goodbye, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.